Ladies, young ladies and gentlemen, good evening to all of you. In international news headlines, I said, nothing is going right for France anymore. While Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, Guinea, and others are successfully reorganizing their economies, international institutions are announcing very, very bad news for France. France is experiencing a budgetary drift. Nothing is going well in the French economy. All the force that Emmanuel Macron is making the visits, all that stuff is all having an impact on the French economy today. The bad news is that the IMF and others are preparing to put France under a structural adjustment plan. You won't believe it. You won't believe it. France risks experiencing what its former colonies went through. The structural adjustment plan. Ladies and gentlemen, what is a structural adjustment plan? Let me tell you about it first before we go deeper. A structural adjustment plan, SAP, is a set of economic reforms imposed by the IMF or the World Bank on developing countries. It's on developing countries that these are imposed forced upon them. But France, which claimed to be very strong, is falling, its economy is collapsing, but they've tried to cover it up because, yes, they don't want other countries, especially those in Africa, to realize that France has become a poor, heavily indebted country. But France's debts, I'll give you the exact figure in a moment, has grown so much that they have no choice. They have no choice. Nothing can change the situation anymore. So, the structural adjustment plan imposed by the IMF on highly indebted developing countries. The goal of the structural adjustment plan was to stabilize their economies by liberalizing them and reducing public spending. For example, in the 1980s and 1990s, many African countries like Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire, you see, implemented structural adjustment plans by privatizing state-owned enterprises, reducing subsidies, and opening up their markets. Have you noticed that France has started privatizing its companies? Last time, there was a competition between two French companies and a Chinese company. The famous company that builds the only company France has that manufactures buses, they withdrew. They declared that this company was unable to continue production. Two other companies, another French company stepped in. It said he wanted to take over the shares of the company. But was there another Chinese company? Since France itself, the French themselves, both public and private sectors no longer have money, the French court refused to give the company to another French company. Where have you ever seen that? France is still very protective of its sovereignty. But France preferred to give it to a Chinese company. That's one of the pieces of evidence. The strikes we've seen here and there, the taxi meters went on strike and so on and so forth. They tried to reduce the cost of patient transport to allow them to get a little something over there. Because in economics, even a reduction of 0.05 makes a difference somewhere. They cut the budget for local authorities, but it was useless. They cut the budgets of public institutions, universities. The students went on strike, but it was useless. Now, according to official information, France risks undergoing, like its former colonies, a structural adjustment program. We will go into the details, but I ask you to share this video conference. Share it as much as possible. Share it. You know, they left Africa, we drove them out. Instead of doing what the United States does, coming to apologize and submitting to our demands, they said no. They even spoke to us disrespectfully. They said no. They said, we can develop without Africa, but we have always said it's thanks to Africa that they are where they are. Now, things are getting serious. So, share this so that our friends in Africa can see it. Those who don't trust the struggle we're fighting, those who still think that ibrahimtraoré is just here for etc., etc., they need to see this video conference. Yes, they need to see this video. There you go. And speaking of ibrahimtraoré, I want to take this opportunity to greet Moyen Express and ask you to remember this name. Starting from June 1st, I will tell you all about Moyen Express, the new African platform that will replace Amazon. So according to official information, every week brings its share of red flags and misfortunes for France. Every week, the news is bad. France's public deficit has reached challenging levels that defy common sense. Yes, it has reached levels that defy common sense. In other words, it's unbelievable. Since France's debt has breakfast with a figure of 3 trillion 100 billion euros. That is to say, France's public debt has reached 3 trillion 100 billion euros. Unimaginable. That's what public debt is. The French budget is desperate. French authorities, right now, even if you are appointed as a minister in France, you create as if you haven't been blessed. Because you don't even have the money to run your ministry. Do they even have fuel to get to work? Do they have that? Let's go deeper. So, it's no longer something temporary. Initially, the European Union, since 2024, the end of 2024, the end of 2023, 2024, the European Union decided to put France under economic recovery measures, but it didn't fix anything. Meanwhile, Emmanuel Macron is busy dancing. So, this is no longer a temporary drift. It's a systemic breakdown. Economists from all sides are sounding the alarm in France. The budget trajectory is unsustainable. The very idea of an ordinary recovery, as envisioned by the European Union, has become an illusion. The prospect of placing France under supervision is currently they are considering it. Should the French economy be put under supervision? There are proposals. Yes, there are proposals, but even that is unthinkable. It can't be done. Putting the French economy under the supervision of another country just can't work. So ultimately, the scenario of France being financially overseen by an external authority is what's making headlines. In other words, putting the French economy under supervision doesn't work. Now, the French economy needs to be overseen by an external authority. That's the adjustment plan. That's where the structural adjustment plan will come into play. So this external authority will be Brussels, it will be the IMF, it will be the ECB. All of them are ready. All these authorities are prepared to intervene if the country does not straighten out its finances. So behind the diplomatic statements lies a harsh reality. The French state has lost its credibility and no longer has the leeway to pretend. It's over. It's over for the French state. There's no more pretending to be done. So, here's what's being prepared for France. The IMF has spoken. The IMF did not dramatize the situation for the next few months, but the IMF is sounding the alarm for 2026. As for the 2025 budget, they are managing, hobbling along. But when it comes to France's 2026 budget, the IMF is unequivocal. Yes. So the IMF says that drastic measures will have to be taken. Labor market reform, raising the retirement age, and massive cuts to social spending. The message is simple and clear. Yes, France is heading straight into a structural adjustment plan. In other words, France is becoming a poor, heavily indebted country again. Ladies and gentlemen, that was the top story of the news. Thank you again for sharing it as much as possible. I'll be back with you later, God willing, with more news. This was the voice of your humble servant, the one and only Samurai.